Hi, welcome to today's episode of Conversations with Karen and Kat. I'm Karen Scott Green.
And I'm Kat Hardrick.
And we are here today live
Live.
in Living Color.
That's right.
With Dr. Chana Campbell. And
Yes.
Dr. Campbell is the founder of New Beginning Counseling, LLC.
Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
sister.
you.
We appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Well, thank you for having me.
You, Dr. Campbell, are very impressive.
Mhm.
You are a graduate of Regent University in psychology. You have a master's in community counseling from Argosy. Am I pronouncing that right?
Argosy.
Argosy.
Mhm.
And you have a master's, a second master's, and a doctorate in philosophy from Walden University.
Yes.
ma'am.
Look at all those plaques on the wall. You got any more space, girl?
Trying to prepare myself to better serve the people.
Amen.
Yes, I love it. And so you have started a wellness program. So tell us about Mind, Body, Soul and how that fits in with the counseling services that you offer.
Okay, so I opened my practice here in Snellville about 3 years ago. My background was family. I did marriage counseling and I did in-school counseling for about 4 years. But when I opened my practice, I really wanted to work with women because what I was seeing with some of the adults I was working with, a lot of women are really stressed out, burned out, tired, fatigued. African American women have higher rates of depression than other demographics. So I was seeing a lot of depression and anxiety. But when working with my clients, I found that a more holistic approach seemed to work better in terms of results. So I wanted to work on the body, mind, and soul, and that's how that program came to be.
So you said something that surprised me. You said that African American women have higher rates of depression.
Yes.
And how does that coincide with the trope that we've been labeled and the mantle that we wear and carry on our backs, that we are strong women and, the strong Black women? Ooh.
Deep breath on that one.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. Look.
Please let's unpack that. And thank you for bringing that up. The whole strong Black woman syndrome is something that I hope we can get rid of. I hope women can take their capes off because it is literally killing some of us. One of the main things, you cannot work with me and not do self-care. Period. You have to do self-care. It's mandatory. We as women, we take on so much. Sometimes the role of the house, extracurricular activities of the kids. A lot of women I work with have high-powered careers, and we work under this philosophy of kind of bend but don't break. Ignore your feelings, put yourself on the back burner, and that's where the higher rates of depression come in. And if we think about it from like a cultural aspect, we're not really trained to talk about anything. It was what goes on in our house stays in our house. So people don't open up, they don't share their feelings. And what I find with a lot of women who suffer with depression, they feel like they're alone. Like nobody else is having the same experiences. But if we were to open up and talk, you would find that it's way more common than we think.
Yes, it sure is. I manage my depression. I openly talk about my mental wellness. I am a huge advocate for mental wellness in the veteran component as well as in society, period. So I absolutely love what you're doing because it took me over 20 years to talk about my trauma. And when I walked into that room, there were so many other people who had that same range of never talking about what happened. And so why do you think so many people are angry or depressed? Because they're carrying decades of untreated trauma from the stereotype of, oh, you can't talk about this, or you're alone, and you already feel guilty, ashamed, embarrassed, and all of those buckets, everything that come out of that bucket of negativity. But when you are able to speak to someone who genuinely cares about you, now you're liberated. So now I talk more about my trauma than I ever have. And as a matter of fact, I just talked about it this weekend. Complete strangers. We're in the restaurant crying. Right.
Yeah.
me sharing my testimony was able to give them the power to tell their testimony. And now I'm on a mission to try to find them some help so that they can have a licensed professional. But we have to start giving people permission to say, I'm not well.
Yeah.
You always say, how you doing? Oh, girl, I'm fine. You lying.
I'm good.
What's wrong with you?
Or the other, blessed and
I'm
highly
blessed and highly favored.
Okay, that's true.
Right.
But how are you feeling?
How are you really doing?
What's going
Yeah.
on? And we do that a lot with one. And we literally check in. And she knows my highs and lows. And she's very like, okay, sis, how you doing? Like for real.
Mm-hmm.
She literally, and that makes a difference. And I'm hopeful that people can find that network so they'll have somebody to talk to. And then the other thing, because I'm glad I met you and I love what you're doing, I found that you have to have a connection with your medical professional.
Absolutely.
We're not going to open up if there's no connection. And no disrespect to my non-Black leaders, licensed professionals, but you have to be cultural. For me, I needed someone culturally competent. We didn't have to go through my same trauma, but I need you to understand when we say kitchen table or our, what I'm trying to say, when you say, was taught not to talk.
I don't want to have to explain
my history, my culture, my, like you just said, we're taught what happens in this house, stay in this house. Like I was taught that, I repeated that, right? So, but because you know our culture, you already come into the person understanding that these may be some barriers that you have to overcome versus just sitting there looking at us like, okay, I got you. All right, that's it. And then you send away, you don't even feel like this person even did anything. So like now what's going to happen? I'm going to shut back down.
Yeah.
So how do you
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do you approach that when you have new clients coming in? And I'm sure you see all races. I know you primarily look at Black women.
My population is primarily African-American women. But the one thing I try to do, because I understand that I'm a complete stranger to you. You don't know me, and you're really coming in here telling me the deepest, darkest secrets of your life, some things that you've never told anyone before. So I try to create a safe space, a non-judgmental space. I don't take on clients if I don't do a consultation first. I have to talk to you first to make sure that, number one, you're a good fit for the agency, and that what your needs are is something that I actually specialize in. I don't take clients just for the sake of taking people. I'm quick to give a referral if it's outside of my scope of practice. I specialize in anxiety, depression, and trauma, and then I do the wellness component. So if it's something outside of that, I'm more than willing to help you find someone. But as far as the cultural competency component goes, that's very important. And what I found during my dissertation study was that a lot of African-American women felt like they had trouble finding African-American counselors. That was like a big thing. They were like, I want somebody who's culturally competent, but I'm having trouble finding them. They are out there. Great platforms like Therapy for Black Girls. That's where you can find a clinician. But I think it helps in just like understanding the person's experience. And like you said, you don't have to come in and explain to me how our culture works, because I grew up in it and I get it. I understand how religion plays a role in the mental health process. Some people come in, I was born and raised in the church. Some people are hesitant to come to therapy because they feel like, if I show up for this therapy session, like I'm slighting God, like I'm not trusting, I'm not having faith. But I say this: if you're sick, you're going to the doctor. If the doctor tells you you have cancer or something like that, you're going to go seek treatment. And with the mental health side, it really is no different. I think if we can get away from some of the stigma and the shame in our community that comes along with attending therapy, because you hear things like, oh, well, this person is crazy, or they need help, I don't. We don't want to seek the help, but you need the help. And if you need it, go get it, because it can free you. I think it's a shame when you look back over people's lives and you think, man, if they just had some help, how different could their life be? What would the trajectory of their lives really look like if you just sat down and talked to someone? And the thing is this: if you go, you get a therapist and you say, you know what, I don't like this therapist, it doesn't work for me. doesn't mean that they're a bad therapist. There has to be a therapeutic relationship. If that's not there, you're not going to want to open up and you're not going to want to talk, and there has to be trust established. Yep. So to answer that for you, just making sure that the client is comfortable in the environment to open up.
Girl, yeah, I gave my therapist a hard way to go, honey. And now I have especially when they were not culturally competent. And I'm gonna say a short story. I had we have the Crown Act. I don't know if it's in Georgia, I can't think, but I know California was the first one to have the Crown Act. And me and my therapist, who was non-Black, had the conversation because she couldn't understand what the big hoopla was. Because if you own a business, you should be able to tell people what to do and everything. And I'm going, and you my therapist. I'm just sitting here like, you my therapist and you don't get it. So I'm like, no slight on that person. Everything is that's
but cool. You weren't for me. You weren't for me. If I'm sitting in your office and I'm telling you the things that I am going through, I don't need you to try to minimize what I'm feeling. And I don't want to have to code switch when I'm in your office either.
Yeah.
So, I should be able to feel how I'm feeling, and you as my therapist help me work through that, not try to tell me that the thing that I believe and feel is not what I'm feeling.
Because you don't get it. You understand what I'm saying? Because you don't. And so now I got to educate you on the fact that we should be able to wear our hair the way it grows out of our head, whether we want to wear a wig, afro, whatever we want to do with it to get employment.
Yes.
Right. But because you don't look like me and you've never been discriminated against.
Experience. Yeah.
You don't understand that. And that adds to what? Anxiety. Depression. So and because it's in a workplace. And that's something that we need to talk about that in the workplace. Like people don't even I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, but you get visual aid, you get hearing aid, you get people who have physical altered abilities. But we do not, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, we don't think about PTSD. Like I have so much anxiety being in a space, and you got all these men around you, and I'm in finance when I was out here working full time, that it's anxiety for me. You coming around sitting to me close like this, you want us to put in conference rooms and stuff, man, and my flight kicks in. Now I'm about to get fired because I'm ready to cut somebody out.
Yeah. And a lot of the clients that I work with, I have a background in corporate because this is actually my second career. So I worked in finance prior to coming into this, and I worked in corporate America. Microaggressions, people don't understand that, and it's really hard for me to explain racial trauma, even if I'm talking to like a colleague that doesn't have the same background as me. I can't really put it out there in a way to make you fully understand it because you haven't lived it. So like if I were to say, if I had to talk to my son, I have a son, I had to talk to my son about how to interact with the police, Black Lives Matter, all of that. You don't understand what it's like if your husband gets pulled over or he's not home on time, like the thoughts that could kind of run through your head. Did something happen to my spouse? If he gets pulled over, is he coming out of the situation alive? Like if you haven't had those experiences, it can be really hard to understand. So that's where I think the minimizing comes in, because it's in their eyes, it's not that big of a deal, or they may not be able to connect to it on the personal level. And for you, it's like life or death. And for them, it's kind of like, I don't really get it. And like the microaggressions at work, with the comments that are made, I work with a lot of CFOs, CEOs, women, high-powered careers. A lot of them are some of the only African Americans in the room, and they're having these high-powered positions, but they're suffering with imposter syndrome because they're being traumatized at work because of certain things that are being said to them. Or it's always this thing of, I have to temper my response. As women, Black women, we have to be really guarded a lot of times because if I say it too forcefully, now I'm angry Black woman, and I upset everyone in the room. And Whereas somebody else might get the luxury to cry, that might not be a luxury that I have because I'm expected to suck it up and do what needs to be done and quote unquote handle business. And if you're dealing with someone who hasn't had those experiences, I think it can be really hard to relate to.
Yep. So what do we need to do to get the message across to our community, Black women in particular, because that's that's who we are, that therapy is okay. Like it's not a bad thing. Like and even if you get someone who's not the right person for you, try it again. How do you get that message across to your folks?
For me, I think it's about normalizing the experience of therapy. There's such a gap in mental health services for us as African American women. When you look at other demographics, there aren't a lot of people to say, hey, you know what? I did this. This is my experience. This is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. So when you have platforms like this, thank you very much for opening the dialogue up. It allows us to see, you know what? It might not be so bad. This might not be as bad as I think it is. I may be able to benefit. My clients are some of the biggest advocates because they tell their friends. And then another friend tells another friend. Or like when we do, like if I'm out in public or I do workshops or conferences, that's a really great way to get the word out. There's a lot of conversation, believe it or not, when I go get my hair done. There always ends up being a conversation about mental health, especially if people find out what I do. The conversation goes in that way. And me and my stylist, I've been seeing her for years, so we laugh about it all the time. And she was like, every time you come in here, we're going to end up talking about mental health. But I find that a lot of people
look, girl, we need to get you an invoice. We need to get a discount on that hairstyle then.
I know. But a lot of people are curious, and I think they don't know how to go about finding services. That's what I found out a lot too. When I talk to women and I say, okay, well, how did you go about finding your therapist? A lot of people are intimidated, like when they go into these different databases and they see all these letters behind people's names. It's like, what is this? So like the process can be overwhelming, but I would say do a consultation, talk to the clinician, ask the questions, do your research. But I think educating people on mental health services, what it's like, the benefits of it, and just talking more open and freely about it and normalizing it and not stigmatizing it. I think that's the best way to advocate for change.
As we're speaking, when we do our so we had an MLK Day every year. So we had our second one. I say every year, girl, but we're gonna name it, claim it. But that would be nice to have a wellness person on staff, because when we do this, we have like the Sheriff's Department, LT, Chief Carr and their team, and they're the community outreach, and they provide resources like for temporary housing and so forth. But it would be nice to have you be a part of it as well, or your team, so that we can have you out there in the public so people can see you, touch you, and you're not like this foreign, like this scary process. And so now people can see you and walk up and get information, because if we put it out there and make it more normal, right? It shouldn't take us decades to talk about our trauma and get help. You're not gonna, if your toe turns purple, you're not gonna wait 20 years to go to the doctor. Hopefully, I do. Now we know that's another thing in our culture.
Some of us might try.
Like we let's keep that real. We'll go to the doctor, right? But we know that for women, we'll go typically. If I'm not, men don't, but women, our men don't, but us women will go. But we need to find an environment where we can put you and all of what you're doing to me in our community events, so that people can see you and now know how to get in contact with you, because it is intimidating. And a lot of people use their health insurance. What is that called? That
EAP?
Bam.
EAP.
They use that. But what if we don't have insurance?
Which a lot of people don't.
And a lot of people don't even use their EAP.
They don't know about it. So let's touch on that really quickly.
Go ahead. Run with
EAPs up. So and I'd love to participate in anything that you're doing. So keep me posted and I'll definitely come out. But EAP are services that particular jobs offer. Every job doesn't offer them, but some jobs do. So it's like your job will say, we'll give you 12 sessions or maybe 8 sessions of therapy for free. So whereas your health plan may not cover it, your EAP services might. So what you'll usually find is you call in, you ask, they'll give you an authorization number. You call the clinician that you're interested in and see if they're in network, and then they pay for your services that way. Look for sliding scales when you are looking for clinicians, because a sliding scale, they'll offer you a lower rate. Sometimes based on your income. I do scholarships. So I have like a certain number of clients that I try to do sliding scales for. What else is a good way? The Loveland Foundation, they do vouchers.
Now, what is this now? The who?
The Loveland Foundation.
Foundation. Okay.
And they do vouchers. I had a client who got like 12 sessions for free. So you just sign up, and then like once the therapist completes the session, they email it over to them, and then they pay them that way. But I think they do it once a year. And like around, I want to say August, September, but don't quote me on that. But that's a good resource to have too. Let me think of what else might be. With your health plan, if you have a deductible, like you haven't made your insurance deductible, if you go and you participate in therapy, you can get a super bill from your clinician, and it's like a receipt that they send to the insurance company, and then the amount you pay for your session is applied to your deductible. So that way it's not like a total loss to you as well. So those are some workarounds, hopefully. But let me say this.
We have a Facebook.
If you out there getting your hair done and your nail done, but you don't want to pay for your mental health, I need you to do better.
Hello, let's say that again. Is that a t-shirt? Is that a t-shirt? Say again, doctor. What?
Because sometimes we prioritize everything but the thing we need to prioritize. And we got to do better with that. You're not going to be able to take care of your children properly, your spouse. You're not going to be able to show up as the best version of you if you're always struggling like emotionally. And what I found is what impacts you emotionally will impact you physically. I cannot tell you how many times people come into therapy to see me and they have what we call somatic symptoms. So that's when the mental health aspect causes physical issues. So they might be having chest pains and headaches and migraines. And they're at the doctor and they're spending all this money on tests just to find out you're stressed, like beyond belief. And so to touch back to what you were saying earlier about working with a primary care physician, if anybody comes in to see me and they're having all these physical symptoms, the first thing we're going to do first is go get you a physical, talk to your doctor first, and then we rule that out. If that has been ruled out, then we continue working like on the mental health side of things. And then if spirituality is big for you, and prayer and meditation, all of those things can be used to like calm anxiety.
Absolutely.
So whenever I do like a treatment plan, which basically just says what I'm going to do to help you get better, I always make it individualistic and personal based on where you are in your life, what you came in to see me for. So if you can find a clinician that's going to give you the details, work with you on what it is that you really came in to see, and help you produce some results, and not just talk therapy, I think educating the client on their condition. That's imperative. I need to give you the skills to manage the depression, to manage the anxiety, so that when you leave this session and life happens, when life starts lifing,
you can cope.
We know that it does. I need you to be able to have the tools to be equipped to do that.
That's what therapy is about. I wanted to address, there's a comment that a Facebook user made when we were talking about using the EAP at work. There's someone said that it's stigmatizing to use it at the workplace, the EAP. Can you speak to that?
So that could be kind of twofold. Like I have some clients who come in and they only want to pay cash for their therapy services because your insurance company does get like your diagnosis. They don't get your notes or anything like that. So like, let's say if I have generalized anxiety, when we bill for it, it'll say F41.1. It's just like a number code. But for certain jobs, people don't want that to be seen. With EAP, it's kind of like the same thing. But realistically, if you're using EAP services and it's not like something that you feel like is going to impact like your job, is it that big of a deal? That's what you have to just decide for yourself. That's personal, that's individualistic.
So wait, I got a question then.
Okay.
So help me understand this. I use my EAP, the results come back of my condition. It's going to be shared with whom in my job?
Nobody at your job.
Okay.
It goes to the insurance billing department just like any other part of your medical record. So it's not like your manager's looking at it. It's a part of your medical record.
That's like HIPAA. You can't.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. There's this idea that my manager's going to find out. The people on my job are going to find out. That's private and protected information. That's a part of your medical record. So when we say to people your diagnosis becomes a part of your medical record, it's like any other diagnosis that you have. It's like a separate entity. So it's not like everybody at your job and HR knows like what's going on in your life.
So what I had to do,
I guess it also too depends on if someone works in a small office or they're in a big company.
Well, no, because nobody gonna know unless you tell them you use
unless
it.
You tell it, and
right.
Your therapist can't tell it.
When that code comes back, who does that code come back to?
It's part of your medical record. It doesn't go to anybody in your office. Okay. It's a part of your medical record. It's not going directly to the people in your office. Okay. Now, I think what she may be getting at, and if she's still on, she can feel free to let me know whether or not I'm accurately answering her question. Like, is she concerned about the people in her office knowing that she's using the EAP services? Because that goes through HR. So, like, is that a concern? Like, you're worried about that?
She was talking about the EAP services because she made that the user, I don't know if it's a she, made that comment when we were talking about the EAP services.
Correct.
So she was saying that there's a stigma attached to that in the
listener.
Work. The listener was saying that was there's a stigma attached to it in the workplace by using those services.
Right. So somebody must know when you use it. And if
it depends on each company does EAP services differently. So it could be like if you're small in-house, I don't know like who on that end is seeing things, but like for major companies, they're going through, like if you have United Healthcare, there's a different division of United Healthcare that does the EAP services. So does that make sense how I'm explaining it like that? So yeah, but this is the thing. This is the problem still. It goes back to stigma. Everybody needs help. Nobody's looking at your personal notes. Nobody knows what you're in session for. Nobody knows what you're talking to your clinician about. So do you suffer in silence or do you get the help that you need? This would be no different than you using your medical insurance.
Well, the other thing to that, Dr. Campbell, I like saying that, Dr. Girl. Look. But the other thing to that is, if I'm already suffering from depression and anxiety, the thought of someone knowing, because the power of that illness is stronger at the moment because it's untreated than my ability to overcome these fears. That's why I'm still going through this loop. Okay. So one, we have to get that person to a space where they have the strength and the power. And I'm gonna give you an example. Don't let me forget my example about when I used to talk publicly and when I ran in office. The other thing to our listener is we need to find a legal way of saying you can't embarrass me and put my business out on front. If I'm going through HR and that's the proper channel,
that's what HIPAA is about.
Correct. HIPAA protects that. So nobody's getting that content. That's what I want people to hear. Nobody in your HR department no therapist is gonna call and be like, hey, they have anxiety and depression, and then they start to whisper. It's part of your medical record. I couldn't go to your doctor. I couldn't go to your job and say, hey, you know what? So-and-so has cancer. Right. That's not how it works. So I want to be really clear on that. I think more so it's about understanding the process and how it works. So if you feel this way, right? If you're worried about the stigma, this is what I'm going to advise you to do. and you want to use the EAP services, call and ask directly. What happens? What information is provided? Who's getting it? Ask the questions. But like I said, your medical record is a separate entity that is not going to your immediate manager. It's not going to your HR department. Nobody's should be able to sit in a meeting and say to you, well, we know you have depression because we know this, and that. That's not allowed.
So when we initiate our EAP, it's online. We don't have to go to HR to start it.
It depends on the company.
Correct.
And it depends let me use like United Healthcare, for example. You call the number that's on the back of your car and you say, hey, do you offer EAP services? And if they do, they direct you to another division of United Healthcare. That has nothing to do with anybody at your job.
Right. But if you got that small mom and pop shop,
that's why I said ask the question.
Right.
Ask the question because I want you to be informed so that you can make an informed decision. Because each EAP operates differently. So just ask the question if you're concerned about anybody having access to your medical records. But you are protected by HIPAA privacy. So I do want people to understand whether you're using EAP or you're using your regular healthcare insurance, you are protected by privacy. So I want you to be aware of that.
So we're going to read comments. Yeah. So there's another Facebook user, or the same, I'm not sure, that says they talk. I've lost a few coworkers who unalive themselves because people talk. Chain of command constantly spoke about things spoken in confidence, speaking from law enforcement point of view.
Wow.
Okay. I am sorry to hear that, but we're dealing with humans. And if people get your information, unfortunately, they do talk. But that's not supposed to be the standard. So if the person is still online, what happened with that? Was it even addressed? Like within the office? Were there any ramifications for that?
And we don't know. That's probably their comment. But I will say my 2 cents is, even if people do talk, your mental wellness is more important than any conversation that anybody can have. And you are protected. If I'm not mistaken, I have an attorney right here and a doctor that says HIPAA prevents that from happening. So if you have the names, jot down names, dates, time, information, and report them behind, because we want you healthy. So bump all of the negativity.
So if you're and what I would say to that is, if you're in an office where you do not feel and you have a reasonable suspicion that does happen because you've seen it, because I definitely don't want to negate anyone's experience, because it's very easy to say, ignore it, but when
that's not what we're saying.
Your world, I would say then to reach out to a professional outside of the EAP network and see if you can find a community-based health center that you can go to on a sliding scale, because I think just about every state there's a network of community health boards, community service boards that have mental health professionals, and they work on a sliding scale. So if you're listening to this and you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable or you don't have confidence in using your EAP through your employer, then definitely go look for community resources.
Do we have one in Georgia? Let me see.
Oh, absolutely.
Do we know what it is?
So it depends on the county.
So it's county. So we're in Gwinnett. Let's just drop.
Gwinnett has a board. Gwinnett has a community service board that is Gwinnett, Rockdale, Newton. Community health. It's a community health center that they provide community health resources. They have them all throughout the state of Georgia, and I've heard that other states have that as well. So if you're listening to this, because they could be listening to this from anywhere in the world, if you're in the U.S., definitely look up community health, community mental health resources.
Gotcha.
And find your professionals. There is someone out there that you can talk to. And it's not going to be as expensive as you believe. You can't put a price on your mental health.
You
Please
really
don't.
can't.
Please
And
don't.
let me say this, because I don't want anybody to be scared or fearful, but I don't want to diminish anybody else's experience either. If that has happened to you, that should not be happening to you, because there are parameters put in place with that. But you're dealing with human beings, and sometimes everybody doesn't do the right thing. We got to be honest about that. Everybody does not do the right thing. But I'm going to say this. If you feel that way, you always have an option to pay out of pocket. Because if you pay out of pocket, that's between you and the clinician. There's no insurance involved. So you do have that as an option, but do not let that be a deterrent for you getting the help that you need. This is about your life, and not just you, but everybody that's connected to you. What impacts me impacts my husband. What impacts my husband impacts my children. If I got trauma that I don't clear up, I pass that trauma to my children. We are talking about generations that are impacted by mental health. So please do not get caught up on this EAP point. Because I need you to go out here and get these services, because they are there for you to help, to heal, to change a generation, to change families. It's bigger than us.
It is. It definitely is, girl. The one little example I wanted to give is when I ran, I cried like, what's the word you said when you have anxiety and it shows through physical?
Somatic. Those are somatic symptoms.
So I have somatic symptoms. And so one of the things that I would do is cry. And when I was running for office, I would cry during the the forums that we would have, and in public or whatever. And people would blow up my phone talking about, stop crying, don't cry, you letting this week or whatever, this jazz girl. Yeah. I had to just say, in my space of recovery, I fought too many years to get to a space where I'm able to even be on the other side and run for office. I'm not about to allow anybody to tell me to go back. My coaching taught me to face my trauma, face my triggers, take a deep breath, do an assessment. Am I relatively safe? Is everything all right? And just, you got to manage it and push through. Don't suppress it. It's taken over your life.
It does.
And when I said that, a particular person actually came to me and said, I suffer from depression, and because of your story, I'm able to talk about it. You see what I'm saying?
That's the beauty. Yeah. That's the beauty in sharing your story, though. And if more of us were to share our story, I think we could heal our community that way. Crying is what we call a cathartic release. It is a release of emotions. And the one thing I tell my clients is, don't come in here and apologize to me for crying. They'll start crying and immediately be like, I'm sorry. No, do not apologize to me for crying. That's what we're here for. That's why so many people are sick, because they're containing this energy. They're containing this trauma. Trauma shows up in different parts of your body. Like, trauma literally changes the structure of your brain. So you're out here trying. I'm sorry, you want to say something? You want to say something.
I'm amening you, because one of our Facebook users says tears are a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
Kat and I were having this conversation just the other day, or was I having it with my sister? I think I had it with my biological sister. Because I was telling her about this horrible case that I was an attorney on. And a young person had been molested. And I was saying how that trauma of the molestation or a child being touched or abused intrinsically changes who they were going to be. So I have seen, in working with young people, working with children, I've seen so many children who have been either physically, sexually, emotionally abused, who now have mental health issues. And it's not that everyone who has mental health issues has been abused, but I have seen that these young people who have been abused have mental health issues. And I haven't read a study on it. Well, that's not true. I have.
Yeah.
But it changed who they were going to be.
And like you said with the brain, it truly affects your brain.
Yeah.
Speak more to that, doctor.
If you go on, like if you were to look at an image of somebody who has PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, the images of the brain look different than someone who hasn't had that type of stress. So if PTSD has the ability to change like the way that your brain functions, I think you're asking a lot of yourself if you think you're going to just get over that. We're taught, get over it. Like that happened. Why are you still hanging on to that? Do you understand how major that is to expect someone to be, let's say, molested, any type, if you've seen someone be murdered, like all the traumas that we face, if you know someone who OD'd or somebody who died by suicide, and we are kind of taught to function in this way of, okay, that happened, but tomorrow you got to be at work. So get up and come to work tomorrow and be here and be on time and show up and function the way that you used to. That's irrational when we say it like that, but that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing day after day. People are pushing their trauma to the back. You know that it's there, but it's kind of like, well, maybe you don't know how to deal with it. Maybe you don't know how to navigate it. You may not have the tools. You may not want to seek help. And people are just walking around holding on to this trauma. But it comes out in different ways. So if I see somebody at McDonald's about to fight because their order is wrong, I know
it ain't about that order.
Under the surface. It's something else under the surface. You're not in here acting like that because of this. When I see people acting out, and especially with small children, so if you have small children, please hear me on this. If the behavior of your child has changed drastically, this is not who you've known your child to be. Figure out the why and not be so quick to punish the behavior. That's what I feel like we do. It's real quick to say, oh, well, you did this. Well, I'm going to punish you this way. It could be like, and I understand that children have to be reprimanded, like you're taking their devices and things. But see if you could get to the bottom of why they're acting the way that they're acting. Because I think, too, with children, they need to be taught emotional intelligence. They need to be taught how to properly express their feelings. And not just them, but us as adults, too. We need to be able to properly say, this is how I feel. This is what's going on. This is why I'm acting the way that I do. Because if you can do that in childhood, you can become an adult who can do the same thing. And for some of us as adults, if you hear anybody doing like inner child work, it's like reparenting your inner child. Because a lot of people are out here giving trauma responses. You're responding from the place of your trauma. You're responding from the place of your hurt. But the mature adult version of you can be taught to respond differently, but that comes with doing the work in session. And I'll say this, therapy is not an easy road, but it's doable and you're going to benefit from it. But for my clients who show up, do the work, do the homework, I always give homework outside of sessions, like interventions for you to use. That way we can see if what we're doing is really having an impact on your situation. These people are going on, they are happy, they're healed, they're whole, they're living their best lives, all because they made a decision to just go sit down and have a conversation. I tell people, just look at it like you're just gonna come, you're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk about some things. I don't force people into talking about anything because you have to approach certain things, especially when you're dealing with trauma. You got to be able to approach it when you're ready, but find you a clinician that fits, that works, that understands you, understands your experience. If the first one doesn't work, go back and try it again. You owe it to yourself to live the best life possible.
Yes. And on that, you got
I just want to ask, our roundup question. So, mental health is always our thing. And we always ask our guests, or try to remember to ask, what is your go-to mental wellness routine to safeguard and protect your mental wellness?
Okay, so this is another reason I started the program. So this is a great way to end. I used to be a runner. I still run now, but not like I used to. I was running half marathons, things like that. And then when I started interning, I had 3 small children. They each had 2 extracurricular activities. I had a job, so I was all over the place. I stopped running. first year I gained 20 pounds. Next year I gained about 15, and then I stopped counting. And I was like, it's time for me to get myself together. So that was 20. So in 2016, I started what I call my morning routine. And my morning routine starts the same every day. I do not deviate because it helps me to prepare myself for what's on the other side of the door that I call the world when I step out of my home. But I pray, I read, I meditate, and I work out. That is my morning routine. And when my children were smaller, they're middle school and high school now, but I would do it before my children got up, before my spouse got up. It was just my time for me. And my clients, I put a lot of my clients who are in the wellness program on a morning routine, and some have a nighttime wind down routine as well. But that keeps me stable. The gym is a good outlet for me, which was why I brought the fitness component in, because exercise helps with depression and anxiety as well. With the endorphins. So that's my routine. I run a lot because running lets me clear my head. It's just me by myself, no deadlines, nobody kind of pulling at me. So those are the things that I do to help keep me grounded, especially with the nature of my work. I have to have an outlet too. I am not opposed to therapy. I am the therapist that will go to therapy if needed.
Amen.
Because so I'm practicing what I'm preaching. And when I tell you self-care, I do self-care. My husband has this little joke. He says, "You're always lunching and brunching." But I go out with my girlfriends. And I'm like, and you know this. So I go out with my girlfriends. I read a lot. But I make sure that I take time for me, because when I put myself on the back burner, my life looked just like the life of my clients. My clients are a reflection of me. And I tell them my pain became my purpose. My pain is the reason I sit in front of you. I get what it's like to not be satisfied with your life, to not know what your purpose is, to have a job that you hate, to cry on your way to work because you don't like your job. I know what anxiety feels like. I'm a very type A personality. And if you know anything about type A, anxiety ranks with type A because it's that perfectionistic type. I had to get out of all of that. I've had to relearn so many things, but all of the lessons that I've learned are the things that I incorporate and give to my clients just to help people get through and make life easier. Life is hard. Let's be honest. Life is hard. So I hope that through the therapeutic process, people can gain the tools to just live a good, happy, and healthy life.
Amen. Yes. Amen.
And so our listeners and our viewers can reach Dr. Campbell of New Beginning Counseling via the website at nbccga.com. Via email at newbeginnings@tsesecuremail.com, and on Instagram at drshana.body.mind.soul, and on Facebook at shana.body.mind.soul. And for those of you who are listening, Chana is Chana. Dr. Chana Campbell. Sounds like, it looks like it's going to be Chana, but it's Chana.
It's Shauna, actually.
Shauna. Oh, look at you. It's Shauna. So you have her information. If any of you want to reach out, there's various mediums, and we're going to post this on our social media as well, and on our website for our contact information for those of you who want to reach out to her. Do you offer telehealth services?
I do. Actually, I'm only doing telehealth services.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Very good. Very
so
good.
People can get you from all around the world. That's
all right.
So love it. We want everybody to get plugged in. Make your health, your mental wellness a priority.
Absolutely.
And you are not alone. You are not alone. So we are here with the village to try to make it happen.
And as always, thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations with Karen and Kat.
Well, we are impacting the world one conversation at a time.